let's take you live to Adelaide now. The Defence Minister Richard Marles, the Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong, and of course the South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas holding a media conference. Let's listen in.
To ensure that all the hopes and ambitions that so many South Australians have for this facility here at Osborne are realised, so it's great to be here with Penny. Along with Pat Conroy, the Minister for Defence Industry. Pat's been assiduously working behind the scenes, I know, for many, many months, and he was there speaking to that great detail yesterday. And Brendan O'Connor, whose commitment to employment across our nation and particularly skills is well known and will be essential in the path going forward around skills development here. And of course Louise Miller-Frost, the member for Boothby, whose campaigning efforts were central to Labor forming government at the most recent federal election. And naturally, you'll forgive me for particularly acknowledging Susan Close, Deputy Premier of South Australia, and also the Minister for Space and Defence Industries, who has been working tirelessly at the state government level to see to the realisation of the agreement that I've just signed with the Deputy Prime Minister today. The Deputy Prime Minister will speak to that agreement in a bit of detail in a moment, but from the outset, today is a historic day for our state as we venture into an incredibly important period, not just in South Australia's path, but also the nation's path to national security, peace and prosperity. South Australia has a central role to play in contributing to our national effort to maintain the security of our region by providing the Commonwealth with the highest end equipment that could possibly be procured anywhere in the world in the service of our Navy. Vice Admiral Mead, along with the Deputy Prime Minister, yesterday announced the most substantial contribution to South Australian defence industry, in fact the national defence industry, in our history. And South Australia is more than capable of meeting its end of the bargain. The South Australian State Government stands fully committed to work with the federal government to ensure that this massive endeavour, this unprecedented enterprise of building nuclear submarines in South Australia is done on time. We have the population and the history of naval shipbuilding in South Australia. What we've always needed is a continuous pipeline of work that allows businesses to invest in, but just as importantly, young people to make career decisions around to ensure that we can deliver the workforce of tomorrow. And today's agreement speaks to the development of that workforce into the future. The agreement we've just signed speaks to the Skills Academy. It speaks to the land transfer that will be required and also seeks to address other critical elements, including additional university places, all of which will be necessary and more to see to the nuclear submarines being built here in Osborne. The fact that the Commonwealth sees in South Australia the ability to build the most complex machines that have ever been produced in the history of humanity, I think says a lot about where South Australia is going. And we stand ready to do whatever is required to develop the workforce of tomorrow and make sure we step up to the plate and meet the nation's security needs. As we said yesterday, there is no longer a question about where the work is going to come from in South Australia. It's a question of how we develop the workforce to do the task at hand and meet the nation's requirements to deliver the most complex machines ever built in the history of the country in the service of the Royal Australian Navy. We're excited about that proposition. It's one that's been a long time coming, but now we can plan for the future in a more deliberate way than has ever been able to be provided for in the past. So I do want to thank you in particular, Richard, and of course the Prime Minister, for your commitment to South Australian industry, but more importantly, a commitment to ensuring that our Navy has all of the equipment that it requires to preserve the prosperity and peace of our region.
Well, thank you, and can I start by saying how much of a pleasure it is to be here at the Osborne Naval Shipyard, to be here with my good friend Peter Malinauskas, the Premier of South Australia, Premier, Deputy Premier, my ministerial colleagues, Louise Miller-Frost, the member for Boothby, and Vice Admiral Mead. It is fantastic to be here today. Yesterday's announcement commits Australia to developing the capacity as quickly as possible to build nuclear-powered submarines here in South Australia, right here at Osborne. This is demanded of us by our international partners. This is a massive endeavour. It is of the same order of magnitude of the Snowy River scheme in the 60s. It's going to transform our national economy, but it is going to transform the South Australian economy. Thousands of jobs, a lifting up of the technological capability of the broader economy. What this will see across the three countries of the United States, the UK and Australia is the fourth production line to build nuclear-powered submarines, adding to Huntington's and Electric Boat in the United States and BAE in the United Kingdom. And as the Premier has said, this is going to be building the most complex machinery that is known to humanity, which will mean this site will become one of the centres of highest technology industry in the world. And it is absolutely a vote of confidence in Australian industry, but it's a vote of confidence in South Australian industry. You've just witnessed the Premier and I sign a cooperation agreement between the Commonwealth of Australia and the state of South Australia. The most important aspect of that is a headline commitment between our two governments to work cooperatively together to deliver this project. And that's really important because that's going to need to happen not just during the life of our governments, but across Commonwealth and South Australian governments over the coming decades. It is a profoundly important statement of intent because unless that is in place and unless that cooperation is enduring, we will not be able to deliver this capability for our nation. And we understand that as much as this will transform the South Australian economy, the nation is going to be reliant upon South Australia to deliver this capability to our country. In the here and now, there are three important practical initial steps in terms of that cooperation. The first is a commitment to an increase of 800 university places here in South Australia over the coming 4 years in areas which are critical to the building of nuclear-powered submarines, particularly in areas of engineering and mathematics. The second is the establishment of a training academy right here at Osborne, which will provide for apprentices and the trade-level training which is so particular to the building of nuclear-powered submarines, and my colleague Minister O'Connor is going to speak more to that in a moment. And the third is a land exchange which is going to provide South Australia with really important land at Keswick in urban Adelaide, land at Kultana which is important in terms of the hydrogen project, but from the defence point of view is going to provide in exchange the land right here at Osborne necessary to put in place the construction yard which will ultimately build these submarines. And I want to emphasise that our intent is to build this capacity as soon as possible, which will see the construction of the yard happen immediately, and this land exchange today forms the beginning of that. This is happening right now. I really want to commend the Premier on his engagement on this project. Peter knows absolutely how central is South Australia's cooperation from a national point of view in terms of delivering this capability to Australia. But I can also assure you that he is a fierce advocate on behalf of South Australia and wants to make sure that this is going to provide the benefit that it will inevitably do to the South Australian economy. And I think I'd really want to say to everyone around the country, and particularly those here in South Australia, you can have the highest degree of confidence that the governments of South Australia and the Commonwealth are working as closely together as possible to deliver this generational project for our nation.